All right, everybody, here we are with another episode of Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Song. I am joined today by the host of The Extra Yard, Alex Donno, who is also paired up with Troy Stradford, sometimes. It's like, these guys have been awesome. They've been doing shows. You need to check them out on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And for those of you who are Hurricane fans, he also does Locked on Canes as well. So how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing really well. I'm doing better than Tyreek Hill's house right now. I'm glad everything was okay there. I've seen these videos online that his house was on fire. Nobody hurt and everything. He had to go home and help take care of that situation. So thoughts and prayers going out to Tyreek Hill and company. Thankfully, again, nobody injured or anything like that. But that is obviously not something anybody wants happening to them.
No, absolutely not. It's kind of bizarre. I was at work when I heard the news that was going on, and I thought to myself, man, he just can't catch a break, can he? He's not going to get his 2,000 yards. He's not going to. He's currently injured. He's in a walking boot, which we was seeing the pictures of that, and also his house burned to the ground. Like, what else? Never mind. I don't want to challenge worse. Like, worse will always find a way to be worse. So
True.
I'm not gonna try to jinx this man. He's suffered through enough. So we're going to go ahead and get into some Miami Dolphins talk. Donno, I've got some questions I'd like to ask you because I've gotten into some debates with some friends of mine. I'd like to get your opinion. Also, we'll get a little bit more into the Buffalo Bills game coming up and what's at stake for Miami. But before that, really quick, just want to go ahead and mention, as always, this show is brought to you by our good friends over at PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is the revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues, whether that is the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each. It's up to you to decide. Just choose whether your chosen player will get more or less than their projected stat. They give you free squares, special Taco Tuesday promos, Flex Friday specials where you can get your money back if you lose or multiply the amount of money you can normally win. So with offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up if you're any kind of a fantasy sports fan. So use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Again, it's promo code 5, FIVE. Go to PrizePicks.com, deposit your $100, and let PrizePicks give you $100 of their dollars for you to play with and get started winning today. And this show is now also affiliate sponsored by My Nintendo Store. Use the links in the description below of this video to be able to make your purchase. You got Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Super Mario RPG. Both games have received rave reviews from both gamers and critics alike. So you know how hard it is to get those two groups to actually agree with each other. So when you have a game that does both, you know you've got something good on your hands. So again, click the links in the description below when you make your order, and you will be receiving bonus items upon making your purchase. My Nintendo Store, your quickest and easiest way to the world of Nintendo. All right, so Mr. Donno. So I had this debate on Pulse of Fins Nation just the other night with my good friends Ron Caniff and Chris Early, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this whole situation. I've noticed a pattern, and this is the way that I perceive it. I've noticed a pattern with the teams that the Miami Dolphins have lost against. The Miami Dolphins have lost so far this season to the Buffalo Bills. They have lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. They have lost largely to the Kansas City Chiefs defense, not their offense, the defense mostly. And they lost to the Tennessee Titans. That one I view as an aberration, but such is life. And they also lost to the Baltimore Ravens. And that loss was in just an utterly brutal fashion. We thought the Buffalo Bills game was bad. The Baltimore showed us who's in charge around here. But in any case, the real pattern that I have noticed here, and maybe you can shed some light on what your thoughts on this. Do you agree with the notion? The situation that I'm dealing with here is that I've noticed the Miami Dolphins just are not, I want to say, physical enough. They're not tough enough. They're not big and strong enough to compete with these guys because the teams that they've all lost against, Buffalo, Kansas City's defense mostly, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Baltimore Ravens, all those teams, their DNA just seems to be centered around, we're bigger and stronger than you, and we're going to bully you and push you around. Whereas the Miami Dolphins, they want to say that they're not a finesse team. But if you literally look up the definition of finesse in the dictionary, and it tells you about how it's in part about being very precise. It's being very, very detailed in everything that you do. That is the Miami Dolphins offense to a T. If you are not perfect with your routes, if you're not perfect with your timing, if you're not perfect with your anticipation, the offense as a whole gets thrown off. That's what makes Tua so appealing, but it also is his biggest weakness as well. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I don't know, because my good friend Ron was saying that he doesn't buy into the whole physicality. The teams got out physical. Every team is physical in the NFL. So I wanted to get your thoughts on where you see the Miami Dolphins. Are they too soft of a football team to be able to compete with the bigger dogs, or do you think that I'm just looking at this from a wrong perspective?
No, I agree with you 100%. It's a conversation I've had with Troy Stratford on the Extra Yard several times throughout the year. Football, obviously, there are a lot of tweaks, a lot of elements. Mike McDaniel does great things with the eye candy and the motion. But historically, football tends to be, for the last 100 years or so, a game that usually gets won by the bigger and stronger individuals. That's kind of, how this game has gone, a contact sport. Line of scrimmage is so important, all of that stuff. And, I think one of the reasons why the Dolphins have looked so good at times against the lesser opposition, mainly to me, it really comes down to rhythm for the Miami Dolphins offense. If Tua Tagovailoa has the opportunity to get into a rhythm, if he has protection, if the routes of his receivers aren't getting disrupted too much, the Miami Dolphins offense, once they find rhythm, they're absolutely deadly. Now, the problems that they've run into against teams like you mentioned, some of the most physical in the NFL. I mean, Baltimore Ravens have, the top defense statistically, scoring defense in the National Football League. The Philadelphia Eagles, big physical team on both sides of the football, arguably the best offensive line I've seen in a really long time in the NFL. The Bills are a big physical team, and the Dolphins offensively had not been able to get into a rhythm against those opponents. Now, throughout the middle to latter part of the season, something that was giving me a little bit more hope that the Dolphins could become, physical enough to deal with opposition like that was we really started to see the defense kind of hitting a crescendo. Now they've lost a little bit of that, unfortunately, to me, because they've suffered so many injuries. And of course, the latest impactful one being Bradley Chubb. It's going to really hurt being without him, presumably for the rest of the season. Jerome Baker having been out, Jalen Phillips having been out. Xavier Howard is dealing with an issue again. So the injuries have just been mounting up, and it's been taking away a lot of that depth. And then, speaking of depth, the Miami Dolphins offensive line, they've done a really good job throughout the season with unexpected depth and a lot of smoke and mirrors, but that unit has been down bad when it comes to injuries all season long. Thankfully, Robert Hunt has been back in practice, and he should be returning soon, which is going to give this team a boost heading into the playoffs. But no, I think your argument is completely on point because you can't argue with the trend. I agree with you on the Tennessee Titans game being an aberration. That loss just should not have happened. And I think, if Mike McDaniel had that time machine that he was talking about last week, you would probably go also back in time to that Monday night and maybe do a few things differently in that Titans game. But yeah, by and large, the teams that have defeated the Miami Dolphins this year are the most physical in the NFL. This offense cannot operate the way that they do on their best day if their rhythm and timing is getting disrupted. And I think that's been the common thread in these losses. And it's definitely something concerning heading into the playoffs, Lewis. And it's one of those reasons and another thing about these Dolphins, it's not just losing to the bigger physical teams. Usually those losses are happening on the road, okay? And so that's one of the reasons why, hey, I was really hoping the Dolphins could pull off a bit of a miracle in Baltimore and try to get home field advantage throughout the playoffs as long as possible. You could still have an opportunity to host, one playoff game at least if you beat Buffalo this Sunday. If you lose to Buffalo, though, and you've got to go on the road for every game of the postseason as a lower seed, it's going to be really difficult because, yeah, big physical teams they've struggled against. On the road, they've struggled. It's not going to be easy.
No, it's not going to be easy. And this is where I have the larger concern about all of this is that if this is what the Dolphins are, that this is the entire core of their offense, the very DNA that they're being built on is based upon this raw speed, this ability to just outrun everybody around the field, which is great and all, but it's only working as long as you have the ability to get that time to let everything develop. You have to be able to let the wide receivers get that space so that Tua can find them in the open field. Now, if they're getting disrupted, that means they have to readjust on their routes, which requires more time. And as you alluded to, the Miami Dolphins offensive line, for what it is, running with Robert Jones and Lester Cotton and Liam Eichenberg at center. And by the way, I don't know if you saw the camera footage of what it's like to catch a snap from Liam Eichenberg. It is not a pretty spiral. That ball is all over the place. So Tua constantly has to be on his guard, making sure that, okay, I got the ball. Now let me take a look at the field. Like, if your first concern is I have to make sure that I don't fumble this snap because the ball might fly over my head at any given moment, or it might be so wobbly that I might fumble it because it's not in the position that I expect it to be. Once again, finesse, the entire DNA of this team. It just these little itty bitty tiny details can have a massive difference in how this team can function. So other teams maybe don't necessarily have as small of a margin for error, like other teams, like the Ravens, like the Philadelphia Eagles, like the Buffalo Bills. They can get away with more mistakes because, in a way, they have more dynamic playmakers in their quarterbacks. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, obviously, superior athletes than Tua. I don't know if I would necessarily say that by the end of their careers that Tua won't have a better one. Again, you have to understand who Tua is. If you are going to say that Tua is Drew Brees, understand what that entails. Drew Brees is a sniper. Drew Brees is an assassin. Drew Brees is the guy who's going to be able to pick out in a sea of 5 defenders. He's going to find the one spot where the dude is going to be open for who he actually wants it to throw to. That's Tua. But just like Drew Brees, Tua doesn't have the strongest arm. Tua doesn't have the best athletic ability. You have to understand that going in and realize you're not going to get Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson out of these guys. You have to give, just like Drew Brees needed, give him some time to find his guys. Give him some weapons he can throw to. There is Lamar Jackson. I said this on a few shows ago. At this point in my football watching life, I feel like Lamar Jackson is the best player in the NFL. Period. Better than Mahomes, better than Josh Allen, whoever. Because when we talk about quarterbacks putting the team on their back and driving them to victory, the only player who can do that, literally put the team on their backs and make it happen, is Lamar Jackson. Nobody runs like Lamar Jackson. Nobody, no quarterback, not even Josh Allen, can run like Lamar Jackson. He is able to throw from the pocket. We already saw that against Miami. He just absolutely tore us to shreds. So if you're a defense, what do you do to stop Lamar Jackson? Who, once again, if you stop him in the passing game, he'll just run all over you. You stop him from running, he's going to find your open guys. That's why I feel like Lamar Jackson is the best player in the NFL, bar none. So here's my situation. You have Miami. You have Miami with a limited athlete at quarterback. He's not a bad quarterback. He's a very good quarterback. But understand, that's all he is. He can't flip a switch and suddenly become a running back on the fly. It's not going to happen. You have to understand what you have. If you are going to use Tua, you have to understand that this is the kind of team that he thrives in, and that comes with its own set of challenges. What do you do in the situation where your normal finesse does not work? What do you turn to? What is the solution? Or is this a flaw in the DNA of the team that is going to be here for as long as Mike McDaniel and Tua are here?
I think that might be a flaw in the DNA, but I say that with an asterisk. And unfortunately, injuries are an inevitable part of football, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and listen, but usually teams that win Super Bowls are not only the best team, but usually the healthiest team or one of the, obviously we have seen teams in recent years like Nick Foles with the Eagles, win Super Bowls despite having important players injured. It does happen, but typically health is pretty important. It's harder to get away with this quote unquote flawed DNA if you don't have a fully healthy offensive line and if you don't have a fully healthy receiving core. Because again, Lewis, I think for the Dolphins to fire on all cylinders, you can't have Jalen Waddle out of an important game. You certainly can't have Tyreek Hill sitting out of an important game. You can't be down 3 or 4 of your usual starting offensive linemen in an important game. So I think that to me is part of it. Like when you don't have a quarterback like Lamar Jackson who can turn nothing into something, or even Josh Allen who can do that to a lesser degree, when you have someone who relies a little bit more on the system and on the timing of everything, I don't think you can overcome a lack of physicality and a lack of healthy players. Like I don't know if there's anything you can do because, again, like, you try to run the football more. And I think there have been times when Mike McDaniel has gone away from the run a little bit too much. I thought that he did that in the final drive against Kansas City when the Dolphins were trying to pull off that big comeback. You had a couple big carries by Mostert. Then you went away from the running game completely, which was probably plenty of time and timeouts left. So I thought they could have handled that a little bit differently. So maybe trying to rely on the run a little bit more. But then obviously when you've got Mostert and Achane dealing with injuries, that just makes it a lot tougher to do that this time of year. So I don't think there's a good answer to your question, except that you have to knock on wood and hope that you get healthier and you get some players back this weekend against Buffalo that maybe you're not expecting to get back, and that you certainly get players back by the wild card round, because it's going to be hard for this team to win, not only against Buffalo at home this weekend, but certainly win on the road in the first round of the playoffs if you don't have most of your important offensive players healthy.
All right, so now we'll just briefly get into the actual game against Buffalo. So Miami is in a situation where you could argue the entire success of their season may possibly hinge on this. If Miami wins, they are the division champions. They beat the Buffalo Bills against all odds, and they've managed to be the one that everybody was looking at in the beginning of the season saying, oh yeah, Miami could win the division, but it's probably going to be Buffalo. And we all thought that Buffalo was down. They were out. They were playing just awful. And just inexplicably, even if just barely, they've managed to beat the teams ahead of them. They barely got past the Giants all year. They barely got past the New England Patriots last week. And it's pretty sad when you're just barely beating the Patriots.
Yeah.
So here's Miami. They are down in players. Buffalo is down players. Matt Milano's not there. I don't know if both of their safeties are healthy or not. I know that they're down a lot of really good players in there in Buffalo. And now they're coming here to Miami. They're coming to Hard Rock. Everything changes. I understand that the stadium is going to be filled halfway with Buffalo Bills fans because that's how it always goes. Bills
especially
fans
in winter, because they all want to get the hell out of Buffalo this time of year.
Yeah, exactly. Just like give us an excuse. So you have this situation now. Miami I think they can win, but they need to come up with an answer. Now, the question is, do you think that they will? Do you pick Miami to win this game, or are you picking Buffalo to win the division and this football game?
Strange as it may be to say it out loud, because I know the Dolphins are dealing with a lot, even more. You mentioned some important Bills injuries. As a Dolphin guy, I'm happy we don't have to see Matt Milano on Sunday. Believe me, that guy can give us nightmares. But the Dolphins are obviously dealing with more injuries on paper than Buffalo is. I think the Dolphins can and will squeak out a close game. I look at the odds. Buffalo are 3-point favorites on the road. And usually the home team gets kind of a couple points just by virtue of being at home. So you could say, well, maybe they're really 5 or 6 point favorites based on Las Vegas. I find that people tend to overreact to what happened a week ago, right? I think players can usually move past this stuff pretty quickly. And I liked the way Tua and company were talking. They got completely humiliated in Baltimore last week. We all know that. I like the way, Tua, McDaniel, the other players that spoke, they seem to understand, as bad as today was, we have to put that behind us because everything is still on the line against Buffalo the following week. So I do feel like the odds makers and the bettors are probably overreacting a little bit to just how badly the Dolphins got their breaks beaten off a week ago. So usually there tends to be an overreaction and a knee jerk there. And again, outside of that Titans fiasco, the Dolphins have been really, really good at home. They're going to be really motivated this week. I'm going to reserve kind of my final judgment until I see some of these, game time decisions for who, about an hour and a half before kickoff, late evening or late afternoon on Sunday before we see who's not going to play. But, I'm assuming Tyreek Hill is going to go. I know you mentioned he's been in a boot, but I think that's one of those precautionary things that banged up players will do that throughout the week just to, keep their joints still. I think he's gonna play this week. Which obviously I probably wouldn't pick the Dolphins to win maybe I wouldn't pick them to win if Tyreek Hill didn't play this week, but I think he's going to play. I think the Dolphins are going to bounce back, but I think it's going to be a dogfight. I think we're looking at probably a 1 or 2 point game in either direction. And, it goes without saying, Tua has to cut down the mistakes, through a couple of ill-advised interceptions against Baltimore last week. I think it is important for the Dolphins to pick up an early lead to try to keep the crowd into it. Hopefully you can score first or score on your opening drive. I think the Dolphins can pull it off. It wouldn't shock me if they don't, but I definitely think the public, Lewis, people tend to overreact when a team either wins in a blowout, they overreact to the positive. When they lose in a blowout, they overreact to the negative. I remember a lot of people overreacted about the Dolphins when they beat Denver by 50 points. And then I think it was the next week they lost to the Bills at home or on the road. So sometimes people overreact, good or bad. I think we have a little of that going on here. I think the Dolphins can win this game.
All right. And I did pick Miami to win this game as well. I basically put it down to a Jason Sanders field goal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, I don't know. He's on a roll lately. I'll give him that. But, there's something about Jason Sanders lining up for long field goals that still makes me a little nervous. But hopefully it doesn't come down to a 50-yarder. Maybe let's push it to like a 35-yarder. I'm okay with a 35-yarder. All right, so that's going to be it for this show. Mr. Donno, thank you so much for joining me for this. I appreciate you spending some time with me. When do you have extra yard coming out?
Yeah, we're looking probably Friday this week. We'll get in some preview for this Buffalo game. The last time Troy and I spoke, we were previewing the Ravens game, and man, I'm looking forward to catching up with Troy to see if he can give me some positivity, some extra positivity for Sunday. So probably Friday afternoon, you can expect us.
All right. Well, send some of that positivity my way, please, because I'll admit I'm kind of overreacting to that Ravens game too. That's why I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe we just got boat raced like that. It was bad, Donno. Like you would think this far into the season we've cleaned up most of our mess, but whatever. All right. So once again, thank you all so much for joining us. Make sure you go to prizepicks.com, use that promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. And of course, My Nintendo Store, click the links in the description below when you make your purchase for either of those two games, and you'll be able to receive bonus items upon making your purchase. That's going to be it. We will see you all next time for another episode of Fins Nation. And make sure you check out the Extra Yard on Friday with Alex Donno and Troy Stratford.